welcome to an episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I'm Dan, he's Mac.
Yeah.
So, folks, this is the final episode of this season/year of the Artenders. We're finally wrapping it up with 30-plus episodes of slosh, right?
Slosh. Yeah.
But we reviewed a lot of good stuff and some bad stuff. But, I mean, in the case of this season, a lot of great stuff.
I mean, we really outdid ourselves, I think.
And so,
we should be responsible for the accolades of the things that we've reviewed.
But, so let me give you a backstory into what we're reviewing today, which is Disney's FASTPASS, A Complicated History. It's a video. It's a YouTube video. You could watch it right now. You could pause this podcast right now and watch this video if you like, and you should, for free. Easy. It's a video done by Defunctland, which is a page run by an individual named Kevin Perjurer. It's written, directed, and produced by Kevin Perjurer.
Yep. And
it is an in-depth analysis, research, and history on the development and growth and destruction of the FastPass, particularly at Disney World.
Yeah, Disney World. Sorry.
The big well, no, you cut yourself.
No, I said Disney World before you said
But that was me moving the mic, by the way, on purpose.
That wasn't a hit.
No, that was not a hit. That's not a penalty on me either, right? Look, we do this show, right, in order to better equip ourselves as artists and to become better students of art, whether it be through movies or TV shows or even documentaries on YouTube. Right. This is not our first documentary that we have seen on YouTube.
No.
That would be the Bob Emergency.
And this is so unfortunately being compared constantly to it in my mind. As I'm watching this, I can't stop thinking to myself like, yeah, but it's not Bob.
And so the thing is, well, okay, these two things are a little bit different, right? You have one which is looking at sports statistics, and it's just about athletes named Bob, right? But it's funny because of the storytelling that comes from these individuals, and there are a lot of times where you have athletes who have to triumph these unfortunate situations in order to become who they are, as opposed to this video, which is an hour and 42 minutes, Disney's FastPass, A Complicated History, which is still looking at statistics as well, but it's looking at just a history of a way to skip lines at Disney World. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a short story, is that because, the reason why I chose this, Mac, was because, we had just both gone on vacation and we both, needed to pick things respectively for us to review. And I thought, great, I'm going back home to Orlando. Why don't I pick something that's sort of in tune with, what I'm going home and seeing, right? So I did go to Disney while I was home. Yes, I did not. I did go to Disney World. I only went to Epcot, right? And this video covers Epcot a little bit, but we'll get a little bit more into it. But I saw this documentary months ago, and I was thoroughly impressed by the storytelling of it all.
Yeah.
And the amount of information that is dumped onto you, and I was also shocked because I was like, oh my god, this is just on YouTube,
right?
This is not a thing that you have to have a streaming service
I really hope
or
this
go
guy
to
is
the
actually
movie
getting
theater.
the money he deserves.
Yeah,
to
exactly. This is just something that's on YouTube that's just made by somebody. That this one individual, even though there's a Patreon that's helping him out, he is the bread and butter to this whole entire project. He himself and his, And so I was just thoroughly impressed by what this documentary delivered in terms of condensed storytelling through statistics and through history of something that's as niche as the FastPass. But then it actually sort of becomes a documentary that's examining the human psyche and examining infrastructure and examining the unknown of us as human beings trying to skip infrastructure, essentially. But Mac, I guess the leading question, we try to avoid ourselves from asking each other this question for this podcast, but I'm failing to come up with a better question right now because I stink at my job occasionally, and that's just going to have to be
I'm excited to know
case.
what it is now, actually.
Well, Did you think this was good? Did you like it? Did you enjoy it? Did you have a good time? What were you expecting? What was the end result? Were you expecting something of this quality? Because I'm sure that you had some sort of, like, reprehensiveness, I suppose. Well, reprehensiveness is a strong word. Apprehensiveness.
Sure.
Apprehension, rather. When it comes to just, like, a documentary on YouTube, how good can that be?
Sure. Well, I think that you're talking to the right and wrong person for this, in that I've watched a lot of YouTube documentaries. This is like a subsection of YouTube that I'm very familiar with, and I love a whole lot.
Yeah.
Right. Like this, like over an hour deep dive into blah 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 blah, and so I think having a small history in that. Where I am really is, it was a very good YouTube documentary, and that's about it, which is sad for the sake of the podcast. But it was just a very good YouTube documentary.
Okay, do you think? Sorry. Please go ahead.
I was going to ask you, what was it that brought you to this in the first place? Why talk about it today?
So honest to God, so first of all, the reason why I watched it the first time in my life a few months ago is because it was on my YouTube recommended, and it would never leave. It never left. It just stayed there for like weeks and weeks, and I'm like, what the hell is like? And I saw some of his videos before. I saw some of Defunctland's videos before. They're great videos, and like they're well researched about really interesting and unknown things that kind of like he's showing a light to these sort of like sometimes failed aspects of theme parks, right? He examines a lot of theme parks, and most of the time theme parks are rides or attractions that no longer exist, and try to look at, okay, why do these no longer
become
exist?
Kind of obsessed with Disney in some weird way, but he my favorite video of his was the craziest party that Walt Disney ever threw.
I don't know this video.
Highly recommended. It's much shorter.
What a tease just by the title.
It's amazing. It's really, really, really funny. I don't want to spoil too much in the podcast because that's not what we're talking about. But it is, it's good. And he is just so informed. And I think that he does a really good job of, well, this is ironic that I'm saying this because it's going to come back up later in the podcast. He's a very good storyteller.
Absolutely.
In terms of data. You can tell by a lot of his videos, but especially this one, that he is obsessed with data and numbers and graphs.
Because
and
he understands
information.
That in this aspect, the data tells the story.
The data tells the story. And so he does a very good job of looking at data, figuring out what story it tells, and giving us that.
Yeah.
Which is fun. Like, if you have a good time, and this is going to sound stupid, but I think that some people might actually understand what I mean whenever I say this. If you have a good time and it is pleasing for you to research numbers or graphs or data like this is the guy for you. That sounds ridiculous, but that is like...
Yeah.
It's pleasing at times.
Well, because like there are these like benchmark moments that happen for like an attraction or a theme park or a FASTPASS's history. But then it's like, okay, but what are the bridges to these benchmarks?
And there's
that's what he
something
does.
About journalism that involves data that makes you a little more attached because you know they can't lie.
Yeah.
These numbers don't lie. So there's something kind of beautiful about that. Now, he does a really good job of interpreting data. So like there might be some interpretation to it that, you know, is a little bit of like his own oomph to it that might take it a little bit away from like what actually happened, but it is very entertaining nonetheless, and it's all backed. It's very, very well backed. Was there a specific moment for you that was standout?
Okay, so like the reason
Any
why
piece that you went, wow.
Okay, so I guess we're skipping to sort of like the middle end-ish of this documentary, right? So first of all, what this documentary does, that in order to tell the story of the FASTPASS, it has to tell the story of lines in Walt Disney World. And the story of Bruce Laval, who was an industrial engineer and tried to essentially find a way to not have these giant lines exist at Disney World, which is a totally fair thing for somebody who works in operations to like try to like
Absolutely.
eliminate, so
And
a guest can have
yeah.
a good time and for the park to make more money.
And it shouldn't be something that people go, oh, if they're not able to do that, then the park is shitty all of a sudden. It's more like, if you're able to think of a way to actually cut down on like wait times, that would be awesome. But
Yeah.
no other park has ever done it, or nothing even similar has ever been as successful as Disney with wait times and lines, outside of just like appointments and making appointments. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like they talk about that a little bit, like
Yeah.
the DMV and like you just sign up for a time and show up at your time or whatever, and that makes
But
sense.
they try to do that for rides.
Exactly. But in terms of wait lines and standby times for lines at amusement parks or anything even remotely similar, concert venues, even like anything that you're waiting in line for, Disney has always been the best at that, regardless of it being absolutely horrendous and insane wait times.
I suppose so, or rather they've, I guess in your mind's eye, like I don't necessarily equate Disney to being the best at lines per se, but I guess we'll get into that now.
Yeah, but like it's just because that those are like some of the longest lines you'll wait in on the planet, on literally planet Earth. Some of the longest lines you will see, period, are for Disney World rides.
Yeah, for a 60-minute, 60-second experience.
But I will say, right now, because you went to Disney World just now.
Yeah.
I went the last time that I went to Disneyland.
You went to Disneyland
in California. In
a year or two ago,
October of last year.
Okay.
And then Disney World with you.
Yeah, which was in like 2018, 2019, one of those years.
Yeah, maybe like 2-3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
3 years ago, I guess. Yeah, and then and I gotta say, both times I did think about often, like, it's really impressive. Like I've been waiting for 2 hours, but it's really impressive how fast we're able to get through this.
Yes. I'm still gonna answer your question about
course,
like
please.
what hooked
Favorite
me to
part.
this
So
documentary.
sorry.
Yes, I will get there. But yeah, actually, let me answer that now, and then we'll answer how Disney does lines in our experience. The reason why this video really, really hooked me is the twist. It's a twist that it does. Like I said, in order to tell the story of the FastPass, it has to still tell the story of lines at Walt Disney World, and then Bruce LaValle trying to eliminate that by developing the FastPass. And because the FastPass was developed, then it became a sort of monster that was sort of like, well, what if, then the FastPass created like these problems about like traffic flow,
Right.
and guests not being able to like make the FastPass and like software infrastructure system. And so then FastPass Plus was developed. And so it became a whole mess. And so in order to analyze the effectiveness of what FastPass does for lines and standby times and for a guest experience, Kevin Perjurer hires an industrial engineer or an engineer of some kind, a software engineer.
And who is Kevin Perjurer?
Sorry, Kevin Perjurer is the director, producer, and writer of
this video.
And is, by and large, Defunctland himself. He is Defunctland.
Yeah.
He runs Defunctland, the YouTube page. And so he hires an engineer to essentially construct a park, right? A sort of software, not imitation, but like not visualization, but I can't think of the
simulation.
Word. Simulation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, I couldn't get
You're
there. A simulation of a park where like a park has, these wait times, and so a guest can get these fast passes to skip these lines at these particular certain times. There's like 7 different archetypes for guests, X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. And so it's a whole thing where you're saying, okay, is FastPass actually better for these guests? Oh no, FastPasses only really seem to be better for guests who understand how to use them.
Yeah.
And you think it's a whole simulation and a whole simulation park that he pulls out of his ass. No, the simulation park Shapeland is actually Animal Kingdom.
Right.
And the entire massive amount of data that he collected is from a simulation that is run on a particular day in 2019 of Animal Kingdom itself.
Yes.
And so it's like,
and then
holy
he runs it again
shit.
with Magic Kingdom.
Say what?
And then he runs it again with
He
Magic
runs it
Kingdom.
again in Magic Kingdom, and he shows that like, okay, so like fast
It's the same.
passes are kind of not, and we are grossly oversimplifying like what he found, but like fast passes aren't and particularly FastPass Plus, isn't as great as Disney wants you to think it be. It's this giant $1 billion altruistic investment that Disney doesn't see a direct monetary benefit from.
Right.
But it's a monster that they created nonetheless, and goddammit, they're going to use that monster to the best of their abilities.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because they have made this monster, and then they're like, okay, well, we have a solution for the monster, and that solution is like this really genius little thing where, like, you know, you guys are going to have to spend a little bit more money, but, like, we've solved the problem. And they're really overlooking and trying to make people forget about the fact that they're the ones that started the problem and they're the ones that can stop the problem. But they're just keeping the problem and saying, oh, but we can get around this problem that everyone deals with. Not everyone deals with that. You do, because you made the problem. It's FastPasses. If you just eradicated it and we all went back to just waiting in lines when we wanted to go to a place, then we wouldn't have that beast that we have now. But it's
because they poured $1 billion into this FastPass queuing system, and because Bob Iger was like, this better work, that of course the pressure was on.
What was the name of? Because Bob Iger was CEO.
Was CEO at the time FastPass Plus was being developed.
What was the guy that got the bracelets?
I want to say it's Kevin Staggs.
It's Staggs. You're correct. Sorry, I knew it was an ST something. It's Staggs.
And Kevin Staggs was like, I'm once again grossly oversimplifying. He is like leader, director of theme park operations at Walt Disney World.
Parks, right. And so whenever he came in and put the nail in the coffin by saying, we're going to do these bracelets where everyone's going to have a bracelet and scan that whenever they want to buy things or get in line or FastPass or whatever, from that point on, that was whenever it became, there's no going back. We can't stop the FastPass thing. We're committing it to it.
Tom Staggs. Sorry, I said Kevin Staggs. I don't know where Kevin came from.
I went with you, so there's no point there. We were both in. I was totally with you, but Staggs. And I think he was the guy that really, whether he intended to or not, I don't think that he's dumb for anything, but whether directly or indirectly, he was the one that solidified the FastPass as the problem, and it was never going anywhere.
Well, because, so what it was is that once, like we said, Bruce Laval developed the FastPass, right, the very first one, but it was how it operated was like these little pieces of paper, these slips of paper that you would get at a kiosk, like right next to a respective ride. So like you can only get the FastPass itself for Space Mountain right next to Space Mountain. You can only get it for Splash Mountain right next to Splash Mountain, etc., etc. And it was like a relatively okay system, we find out later on, but that like the system had its own problems, and so Staggs tried to solve those problems because he was inside the pressure cooker of trying to become CEO of Disney next to replace Bob Iger.
And so he needs some big idea to get him in the, you know.
Yeah, and I will say I don't mind the magic bands. I don't really think magic bands are used anymore. Yeah, the problem is not the bands, is that the whole infrastructure system that was made in order to eliminate the problems of the original FastPass with FastPass Plus, but then became a system where essentially erupted in, and Kevin Perjurer said himself best, class warfare. Where FastPasses worked really, really well for people who understood the system and played the system like a lottery machine.
But the class was not economic. It wasn't like a fight between money. It was simply people, like you said, that understood how to use FastPasses and that didn't. Now, Danny.
But hold on. But it also was an economic sort of system that Disney sort of like, did, because for people if you were staying at a resort on Disney property, you could get FastPasses for an attraction. It's like 60 days and then later on 90 days before your check-in date. Which is insane. And so then by the time like you're a family who doesn't know this and you're just going to Disney and maybe you're staying at a hotel that's off property and you don't really know the FastPass system and maybe you still think it's the old FastPass system, you're screwed and you can't get a FastPass, and then you're only able to ride maybe 2 rides in a day.
Right.
It's a whole system that did erupt in this sort of class warfare aspect. And like, I think wealth does have a hand in it, both wealth and whether or not you lived in Orlando and were an annual pass member.
Yeah.
No, wealth was a contributing factor to this, and it's a sort of thing where I'm not sure if we as, I guess, consumers in this capitalistic society that we live in, if we would have known that period if not for watching this documentary or even noticed that, right? Especially considering that, like, we both live in Dallas right now, so we don't go to Disney that often anymore.
Yeah, right.
Or for you, period, for me anymore.
Right. And luckily, every time that I've been in that situation, Disney World or Land or whatever, I've been around people that have known the system.
Yeah.
And I haven't had to think about it that much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you went with me a few years ago, that was still when FastPass Plus was a thing. And we essentially played it like a lottery system. Even though we didn't get our FastPass tickets like days ahead of time or whatever, like what we would do is that we would... I mean, I had a great time while we were there at Disney, but what we would do is that we would go to these FastPass Plus kiosks. So many words, so much language. We go to these kiosks and essentially just keep reloading the page, and it would just like generate new FastPasses, essentially. And so essentially, if we got a good roll, and sometimes it'd be like, holy shit, like we can get a FastPass for Pirates of the Caribbean right now, and then if we go and write it, that means we can immediately follow up with a different FastPass for a different ride. Yeah. So it was essentially like, I mean, we were playing slots.
Yeah.
The entire days that we were there.
Wall Street, where it is so large and gargantuan, and there are ways of playing it to your favor, but you have to know exactly how it works. And if you don't, you need a broker or you need someone to explain to you how the system works. But like if you're standing in the middle of Wall Street and you look up at the screens and you see all of the numbers flowing, you're just like, what does this mean? I don't want to give it my money because I don't know how it works. And then, but once you understand it, it's awesome and it's addicting. And you're like, oh, this is great.
Because then you're getting a fast pass for like every ride, and you're like, holy shit, yes.
The best part of, in my opinion, or one of the best parts of the documentary, is that it asks right after this whole thing about like the class warfare. It asks a fundamental question, which I have a very specific opinion on, and I think that you might have a different opinion, which is why I kind of want to get into it. Is who is Disney World made for? Right? Which is like, you know, easy answer, everybody, but it's not as simple as that.
No.
Because there's a lot of different ways that you can take this. More specifically, is Disney World made for the hardcore Disney fans? Or is it made for random XYZ Midwest family that is only going to be able to go once in their you know, like in their childhood, like take their kids once, and they've been saving up for years, and like they just want to go and have this one magical experience that the kids are never going to forget? Because those are really your two big markets. Is like recurring, not recurring. Who are you making it for?
People with money. That's who you're making it for.
Okay.
Disney, no, well, I know it's a cop-out answer.
Yeah.
But Disney World is getting and has gotten more and more ludicrously expensive.
Yeah.
Not just the parks themselves, but the resorts and everything the resorts have to offer.
I agree with you there. No, I'm saying, in your opinion, who should it be made for? The people that are the hardcore fans?
In an altruistic world?
If you were the head of Disney and you got to make that call, are you making a park for the one-time family or the ones that you know are going to do everything in their power to come back as often as they can?
I mean, I would... Okay, if I'm only thinking about the money in this capitalistic society, right, and if I were CEO of park operations or CFO, whatever, or of that, or of Disney, I would think I would cater to the person who's going to come back, because that's where the money is.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like hypothetically, like in an altruistic world, in a world that I would like to live in, I want Disney to. I wish for everybody to experience Disney, because I think Disney is legitimately great. And I wish Disney would be for the family who's like saving up, and this is a trip of a lifetime. And like I would want for them to have the trip of a lifetime.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, Disney is a money-making monster.
Yeah.
And in order to be a money-making monster, you have to make money the most you can in any sort of way possible. So you're going to cater more so to the people who's going to come back. Because if you're going to up prices because you can, well, shit, you may as well, because that's going to make you more money.
Right.
And that's the thing that, like,
Perjurer
sort of explains at the very end, that,
shoes.
like, that there's two ways to look at this whole FastPass conundrum development, Genie Plus now mess.
Yeah.
Is that, like, Disney is trying to help out these families who are trying to do a once-in-a-lifetime thing, or Disney's raising the prices of all of these things because they can.
Right.
And because they're still going to make money from it, and it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, Disney is going to make money. And at the end of the day, like, doubly so, they're going to be more desperate about it because of the pandemic that just hit. And those parks had to be closed for a while.
Well, and that, I mean, isn't that like the mantra almost of new CEO
Bob Chapek?
Chapek, you're right. Is that even though he has not necessarily made things better, he's making a shit ton of money.
I don't know the sort of opinion that Bob Chapek has internally with people who still work at Disney. I mean, we can both say that, I mean, probably Chapek was at least respected because internally, because he was just he just got like a contract extension. I think I'm oversimplifying that and using like a sports term, but like he just got a contract extension that was unanimously agreed upon by the board of directors.
Yeah.
And we know that Bob Iger was liked simply because he was there for so long.
Right.
And like, I think
Bob
it's been
Iger
known,
was like a heart of Disney type person, but it seems as though the main appeal of Chapek is that he makes so much money.
And he helped keep them afloat when
during
COVID
the
really
pandemic.
hit.
Exactly.
That even when the parks were closed, and even when the cruise lines were closed as well, and even when resorts were closed, like, those are like, we know, right, that the movies make a bunch of money, of course, but like what helped kids keep Disney afloat during the pandemic was Disney Plus. But generally, money-making monsters for Disney are the parks and the cruise lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you eliminate both of those, holy shit, how are you? And I mean, it's still an unfortunate circumstance, and like, you can feel one way or the other, and you're justified to feel both ways about like the immense amount of firing and cutting of individuals when it comes to like people who worked for the Walt Disney Company. But like, we're talking about a massive loss of income for Disney.
Oh yeah.
And so we're looking at an individual who is like helping them stay relevant.
A question for you, Danny, because we keep talking about like in an ideal world, everyone would just know the FastPass system, because the main problem of the current FastPass system is that people.
And a timer. What? Oh my goodness!
I did not know that was.
Wow.
Sound was on. I apologize.
Wow. Is that a penalty?
I don't know if it is, because I mean, it's like timer that we both had. It's just that it wasn't on silent. I don't know. We'll talk about it. But a question for you as we go into, and then we'll have to talk about after break, is if the current problem with the FastPass system is that it caters to the people that know the system, and the people that don't know the system are screwed, does it still work if everyone knows the system? Is it like the American economy in that there has to be a top 1%? And the only way that you can have a top 1% is if you have 99% at the bottom. You know what I mean? If everyone knows the system, does the system still work? And we'll talk about it whenever we come back.
Mac, we took like an hour break between the previous segment and this segment, and we're going to see how detrimental it is to our current psyche and the way that we deliver the rest of this podcast. Because who's to say? Well, this may just be one of those episodes that we just kind of have to like, it's there.
Yeah, right. Well, this is also, I think, going to be an interesting little process for us, because I am going to have a hard time remembering what exactly it was we were talking about in the first half, like to make sure we don't revisit anything or anything like that. But
so we'll see.
Either way, we'll see. What I know we were talking about is if the solution, or if the problem with FastPass is that everyone that knows how FastPass works, capitalizes, and everyone that doesn't is in the shitter, is the solution everyone knowing FastPass? If everyone knows FastPass, does that magically solve things, or is it then backed up yet again in the same way that the standby lines are? It's similar to, like we were talking about, the American economy. Is there a system where, is it possible for everyone to be in the top 1%, or does there have to be a lower class in order for there to be an upper class?
There has to be a lower class in order for there to be an upper class. And just so by using the information that the documentary has presented us, so with FastPass Plus, the average, strictly looking at the average amount of rides that a guest rode on, was like 4.33, which is more than the 3.2 or so. I'm trying. I can't remember exactly.
3.2 was original, and 3.7 was
exactly
FastPass, not Plus.
Yes, 3.2 original, 3.7 FastPass, 4.3 FastPass Plus. But the issue is that like that was only the case. The reason why the average went up is because there were more guests that were able to ride 8, 9, 10, 12, like, I know I skipped 11, different rides throughout a day. And I think, like, in the graph, I think somebody rode every single ride as well. And so what that does is that skews essentially the like all the data, essentially. It screws up the rest of the data. So you have the average going up really high, even though that what's actually happening is that there's still a congested amount of guests that are actually riding less rides than before.
Yeah.
So even though on average guests are riding more rides,
right,
what's going on is that you're having a lot more guests now ride only 1, 2, maybe 3 rides.
But here's the thing, I think, is if everyone knew how the FastPass system worked,
which is impossible, first of all. That's never going to happen.
Sure.
It's a foolhardy expectation, and it's it is, but it's an issue that, like, if you're going to introduce a complicated system, then the only people that are going to benefit are the people who understand the complicated system. And if you think everybody's going to get and understand the complicated system, that's not going to happen. But let's just say,
I think they did simplify quite a bit after COVID, with the whole, like, you don't have to do it 60 days in advance. Now you just do, you sign up for walk-in lines on the day of. And I know that the whole 7 a.m., 1 p.m. thing is not ideal.
No, it's
and there's
not.
a lot of problems still with the current system. I think they did simplify it. Like, it's easier to understand now than the one.
Sure, but that, like, I mean, we're looking at a piece of shit that's painted in gold compared to a regular piece of shit.
Right.
You know.
So let's say that hypothetically everyone understands. I think in that world, then it's just right back to the original.
Yeah.
If everyone understands the FastPass system, then isn't it just like, everyone's only going to get like 1 ride rather than like there are 4 FastPasses that they can find if everyone has one, or if everyone can get one. And in which case, I guess the only plus side then is that you don't have to wait. It's like appointments.
And so then the idea is that, like, so guests are spending time doing other activities like gift shopping or eating food, things that would cost them money for the parks to then make money.
I will say this, although it would cost them a bit of money, I think that it would make them money in the long run. I think that it wouldn't be a bad idea if they started considering limiting park size. In terms of daily allowance or attendance.
I mean,
just allowing in fewer people overall in the park per day.
I think so. They kind of already do that, and they kind of have always done that. So let me give you a brief history on this, and it's very limited knowledge, but it's good enough to explain what happened. So there is a capacity limit to the parks. They don't accept every single person that walks up. There is a limit, and it's not met that often, but there are times where the cast members at the front of these parks, at the gates, have to turn away people entering the park because the park has, like, hit its limit for the day. Then there are also, for Disney cast members who are able to go to the park, there are specific days where they can't use what's called, I believe, the main entrance pass, and they can't enter the park themselves. Those are like blockout days. And if you want audience member, you can just look up Disney blockout days, and there's like a website that shows you what days are blocked out for Disney cast members, whether or not they're able to go to the park at all or have to do this specific thing, blah, 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 blah. So that's like a self-regulating system as well that Disney does as well.
And there's also tiers for annual passes.
I think so,
in terms of like, you can, if you pay the most amount of money, then you can go any day. But if you pay the least amount of money, then you can only go specific
Then you
days
have
a
to
year.
like abide by blockout rules, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, when we went to Disney, I think we couldn't go to like Animal Kingdom. I think we couldn't go to a particular park because like that particular park was blocked out for the week.
Yes, yeah.
And because
it was in high demand.
My family are cast members, so
and it was because of Flight of Passage.
Yeah, because at which is in the
Animal Kingdom,
Avatar Land in Animal Kingdom,
right?
Or the the portion of the park, right? And then more recently, post COVID, and this is something I found out the hard way, and the hard way is when I got home to Orlando, is that what they do now is that the parks operate on a reservation system. You have to get a reservation to even enter the park.
Right. And although I think that's a hassle, and I'm sure that is frustrating.
Well, this was new information, and it had my girlfriend and I enter the park only one day instead of more days. Because I just didn't know the reservation system.
Okay. So aside from the massive inconvenience that was, and learning that too late,
sure.
How was your experience while in the park? Was it any better knowing that they were either cutting sizes down, or like in terms of attendance, or that the reservation thing required people to think ahead of time or anything like that? Like,
honest to God, it felt the same, and maybe like the park was like less congested because of it. There are occasionally, like, I've only really ever experienced it mostly in like Magic Kingdom, where there is like congestion like a motherfucker.
There was that
where
one...
you have like parts of the park that are it's a flood of people.
Yeah, I remember there was.
Bless you! Wow, a sneeze, a rare sneeze on the podcast.
Very, very rare.
Wow,
shockingly rare. To be
honest.
I
know, right?
Anyways, I figure more of those. But anyways, what was I saying? Yes. Well, whenever we went to Magic Kingdom last time, I remember there being a time where, not in the middle, they do a really good job keeping Main Street pretty like okay, except for after fireworks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there was one time where we were in, what's the one like where Peter Pan is and like a lot of the kiddish rides?
Probably Fantasyland or Front.
Yeah, like right
I think it's Fantasyland. Yeah.
That was a nightmare.
There were so many people.
We could barely move.
Yeah, it was tough.
And it wasn't even like in lines. Like just moving through the place was nearly impossible. And something just dawned on me. Were you able to go to Disney World pre FastPasses?
Nah, I only remember. Well, I think FastPasses started in like late 90s. Did they not? I can't remember exactly, but I only remember there being.
But you remember the FastPass system paper.
I remember the original FastPass system. Yeah.
And then the transition.
Yep.
So from your perspective, what was the change in your park experience?
The change was, instead of getting a FastPass at the kiosks at the rides, I instead get the FastPass at the individual FastPass kiosks around the park, and just finding out where the kiosks are, but like still having sort of like, honestly, the FastPass kind of determine your day.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, there was a weird aspect that I personally enjoyed from a FastPass, where it was like a soft itinerary.
Yeah.
Where it was like, okay, so we're just going to like go to this ride at this time. So in the meantime, like, let's say it's like 2 hours from now. In the meantime, let's figure out what to do. And so like it kind of narrowed down the options of what to do, because when you're in a Disney park, there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
It's analysis paralysis to a T. Yeah,
yeah.
It's overwhelming, and then you get there and you're like, oh my God, there's so many rides. I want to see the gift shops. Maybe there's a character I want to see. When am I going to eat? When am I going to have lunch? When am I going to have dinner? When am I going to have coffee if I need coffee? Like, it's all these things. If I'm going to park hop, when am I going to do that?
Oh God, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
That right there is quite possibly my biggest nightmare. Hearing about people that park hop, I'm like, oh, I could not. That's so difficult. I'm sure.
It's like exhausting in a way. It's surprisingly.
And what's funny is that the guy in the video,
Kevin Perjurer.
Kevin Perjurer was talking. I know. Sorry. He was talking about how a lot of people don't like the FastPass system because it is not flexible, and it's not like you can't.
This is true.
And I understand that, but the way they market it and the way that they phrase everything, and correct me if I'm wrong, it kind of feels flexible.
Of course, they want you. Yes, they want you to think that it's flexible.
And they do a good job of tricking you.
Hey, I mean, specifically with FastPass Plus, right? Which really made the monster, as we see. I mean, as we see in this documentary, which we haven't talked about enough. Like the sort of visual components of this documentary, that there's a lot of like animation where it's just like dots like going around and stuff and shapes and stuff, but like it's whimsical and fun, and it adds to the storytelling of this documentary. Now, with FastPass Plus, right, you could do the 60 days before you check in at a Walt Disney resort, get the fast passes that way. But like, I mean, it's something as simple as like, let's say, you know, somebody got sick, so then you have to push back like the reservations like a few days or something like that, and then you're out of your fast passes.
Right.
Period. Right? It's a thing that falls apart really easily. That because it gives you the idea of flexibility, because you can do it really far in advance, but it's actually not that flexible as something goes wrong, and because like now time is the biggest sort of economy when it comes to a Disney park.
Right.
Then now, because you have lost your fast passes, therefore you have lost time.
Big time.
At these parks.
Yeah.
And even though for a lot of these rides, which there are two gripes in this documentary that I have, is that even though a sort of statistical documentary is interesting, I still wish there was like maybe an interview, just one at least. There's not a single interview, which is both a great part and probably one of the worst parts. But also a thing to note is that people hate lines. Yes. But what a lot of these rides do is that the lines are really interesting to stand through.
Yes, absolutely.
At least
that
for
sounds
me,
insane, but I agree.
When I was at Epcot, right, most of the lines, I never needed to look at my phone, because at least it was, I mean, of course, the biggest gripe is like lines that last for a very long time. But these lines were just moving, you know, quick enough that like it was interesting enough. It was interesting eye candy.
The Imagineers and the designers do such a good job of designing not just the ride but the line. Yeah. That exactly is exactly like you said, especially the newer stuff. I remember Tomorrowland.
Yeah, Tomorrowland in Magic Kingdom.
Tomorrowland in Magic Kingdom, Epcot, like you said, and then I don't know how much you've dove into this, but I spent a shit ton of time in Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland. Yeah. And that is probably my first place right now. But those three specifically have such good lines. Yeah. Where I'm like, oh my God, you've given me so much to do and think about and see, and it's awesome. It really it helps a lot. And also the smartest thing that I saw them do was that it wasn't like just a tunnel. It was that they designed it, and like the architecture was such that it felt like you were going from room to room. Yeah. Even though you weren't. It's just a warehouse.
Well, Kevin, our buddy Kev, briefly explains it in the documentary that like Imagineers then use these specific techniques in order to make line waiting not as painful. And I wish he got just more into like specifically what these lines did, because a lot of the stuff is really interesting. And Soarin', for example, at Epcot, like they have this game that you can play on your phone, like against each other, but just like a trivia game. And then you have like Test Track, and there's a bunch of like different cars like on display and stuff like that. So I think it's like really, really cool things. And then when you hit a part of a line or a line that doesn't have that creative imagery, then it's like, holy shit, this is kind of boring. I am standing here for a long time. Yeah. That I think a big contributing factor that I wish was discussed a little bit more in terms of guest experience in lines is just how the lines themselves are designed. Yeah. That's all.
Well, and also that's a big one that I wish that Six Flags would take. Because Six Flags is becoming so much more chain now. Like they've opened so many locations across the country. Yeah. That it's just like, guys, you have great rides, and overall the park experience is pretty decent. It's just the lines. Like take a note from Disney. Give us something to do, because the wait times are not as bad as Disney, but pretty comparable. And oh my gosh, it's just you're sitting in the sun. They don't even give you an insight. They don't give you anything. You just are sitting in the sun waiting for like an hour and a half. It's insane.
That even though this Fast Pass became an absolute abhorrent monster. Yeah. Disney is the cream of the crop when it comes to like literal world building in their.
And that's what I meant in the first segment of like, are they like the longest lines on the planet? Yes, they do a really good job of it though. Like in terms of like managing that many people with that few rides, I think that's something that's also not really talked about a whole lot. Is that although yes, Disney is a theme park, there are a lot less rides than you think. There's a lot of attractions, but there's a lot less rides than you think in terms of like, okay, I want to ride a bunch of stuff today. What are my options? Like, how many different lines can there be and things? And it's like, well, I mean, within one park, there's only so many options.
It depends
for
on the
that
park.
many people.
It depends on the park.
Fair.
And then there are some things where it's just like, it's a small world even in your like demographic? Like, do you want to go on It's a Small World? Like,
and
that's probably,
no. Answer
or
no
like the
for
Winnie
me.
the Pooh ride.
Right.
You know, stuff like
that. Right. No, I will say, strangest thing in the world, that Peter Pan ride slapped. I went on it like, okay, who cares? Amazing. All the kid rides, trash. Peter Pan, amazing. That's what I'm going to say.
Interesting take.
I know. Anyways. Yes. Oh, crap. I was going to say. I'm so sorry.
But let's talk about the documentary itself. Because
my biggest gripe. Because you were talking about your two gripes. My biggest gripe with the documentary is this. Like I said, I was doing an awful job of comparing it to The Bob Emergency, the other documentary that we watched.
Yes, the other YouTube documentary specifically that we had reviewed last year.
Right. Now, my biggest problem with this documentary in comparison is that they both do a decent job storytelling. Of course, The Bob Emergency caters a little bit more to like individual stories, you know?
Yeah.
Feels like Once Upon a Christmas. But the problem, I think, with this one is that it doesn't back up at all. It doesn't do a very good job of like zooming out, if that makes any sense. Whereas The Bob Emergency, at first I'm like, why do I care? It's just a bunch of Bobs. And like, even if I care about individual stories, what's so cool about it is that it backs up and it makes you, it's like a microcosm. It is, yes, we're talking about Bobs, but what this ends up being is a documentary about sports and how it is like reflective of the human experience and humanity and community, right? But that's through the lens of Bob's. And they could have done that a million times with this documentary, but they didn't. I
think I have an explanation.
Uh-huh.
So with the Bob Emergency, it was a story told through characters.
Yeah.
In this Disney's FASTPASS, A Complicated History, there are, I would argue, no characters. And you may say,
but
well, Bruce Laval, Bob Iger, Thomas Stacks, like those are characters. Like, no. Those are chess pieces.
They should
hardly have insight into those individuals and their specific, like, roles and like what they did. And I imagine in Kevin Perjurer's defense, those were things that are probably hard to research and hard to find because it's probably really tightly wound and tightly, shut but in terms of within, Disney walls.
You could have made us care more about those characters without like reckless speculation though. Like there's clever ways of getting us attached to those people or following their journey without, you know what I mean?
And perhaps what the solution could be was just like maybe more quotes, maybe talk about specifics of
clips of them,
or
absolutely.
Specific visual clips. Maybe
there were a lot of times that they mentioned quotes of the Chapek.
Yeah, Bob Chapek. Yeah.
That I was like, I wish I would have just gotten him a clip of him saying that rather than the quote.
And sometimes, maybe that quote was not accessible via video form.
Yeah.
And that's just perhaps the nature of the information that was gathered for this documentary, and that was just what Kevin Perjurer just had to do, right? Yeah. But even with that context, it could still be a tick against it, even acknowledging the rock and the hard place that maybe the documentarian was in.
Yeah. Well, and I think another big problem of the documentary is that it, at a certain point with Bob Emergency, it stopped being a YouTube video and became a documentary.
I see.
I think this stayed a YouTube video the entire time.
Go on that.
I think kind of like with the story thing, but also just the animation style, the voiceover style, the just most of it's just us seeing either clips or pictures.
You have the funny sort of like detour that's like the Dylans, and for a second you think part 4 is about the Dylans and their adventure to America,
right?
In the 1700s,
and it feels like there are a lot of YouTube channels that make similar videos like that, but just in 20-minute chunks or in 10-minute chunks, or sometimes even in 4. I think another a really good example is not now this, but the Vox.
Okay.
Vox makes like mini documentaries almost, but they look like YouTube videos now because over several years that's just become like a section of YouTube that we expect.
Right.
But those are still very separate from a documentary that you might see on Netflix. Of course, Netflix is a lot more cinematography-based documentarians.
And interview-based as well.
Absolutely. But I think HBO, I don't know if you ever watched an HBO documentary. There's a stark difference between HBO documentaries that I've seen and Netflix documentaries that I've seen. In this kind of weird way that the HBO is more about the information, whereas the Netflix is more about the emotional experience, right?
Yeah.
Which has their own merit either way. I think that Bob Emergency, although it would have been on the lower tier, could have been an HBO documentary pretty easily, and I wouldn't have thought too much about it.
Well, the thing is about
this is
that,
a YouTube video, though.
Yes, so the Bob Emergency was an informational documentary, and then but like the thesis was an emotional core.
Yes.
The thesis,
yes.
The thesis for Disney's FastPass: A Complicated History was never an emotional core. It's just looking at the history of a very niche subject.
And I think...
And it's a very interesting history. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
And I loved watching this
video.
And I loved watching this video a second time. And I'm sure maybe a year or two from now, maybe I'll watch this video again.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that I feel like this should be onboarding for people that work at Disney, to be honest. Like, I thought that a couple times where I was just like, this is so little opinion and so much fact and information that I feel like this is actually really useful to know if I'm working there.
If for whatever reason you need to examine lines or cues, like, no, but seriously, watch this because it's really informative of like the simple thought, how can we eliminate lines? And then you see how one company did it for 50-ish years.
Me and Emma, my girlfriend, and her family, right? We always talk about like, there's a kind of running thing of like, oh, that's a line gag. Meaning like if we find something like a game or a movie or a clip or just like something, right? An app that would be really fun to play in a line at Disney. Like knowing that we have like 2 hours of standing there.
Yeah.
This is a thing that we could do then. Sometimes it's like Sudoku or some shit. But I feel like this would actually be a really fun watch while in lines.
Yeah.
That sounds insane, but like I would watch this while in a line at Disney. But I think that, back on the whole, comparing it to the Bob Emergency, is that I think that probably one of the biggest problems, just like what you were saying, but I think in a more in-depth way, is that what interests John Boyce about the Bob Emergency is the story, is the emotional story. What interests Kevin Perjurer, with this is the information, is the problem and solution aspect of it. He likes the fact that, and he finds interesting the problem, where the problem came from, what is the problem exactly. This is my best guess at a solution. You know what I mean?
And like how others tried to solve this problem.
It became very clear what they liked and what their purpose for making the video was. And very sorry to Kevin, John Boyce's was just a little more interesting.
Well, because like fundamentally from the core of it, you know what I'm saying? Because because it's an unfair comparison. We both know this. It's an unfair comparison.
Absolutely.
Because when you look at sports, like those it's theater.
But I think what's so frustrating to me though is that, because I agree it's an unfair comparison. What's so frustrating though is that there were a lot of chances that he had in this one specifically, in this documentary, to do that. I think that if John Boyce would have been given the exact same information and like Kevin Perjurer as a resource, he could have made a very emotionally impactful and enticing documentary with the same concept and information. Because I think that there, like we were talking about, I think there is a way of making an emotional connection and characters out of the Disney executives. And I think there is a way of, even if he because like you were saying, he had a lot of bits with characters in the bits. Just make it the same character the entire time or something. Like anything, like any emotional connection that we can have. Because I did start getting like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Although it's low production and it kind of distracted me that like it was kind of like
amateurish.
But like with the with the example at the end with the monster where they're talking in the office, and like in this one, and he's explaining, well, like this is a problem that we made, but like our solution is get them to pay more money, and like that whole scene, it kind of did give me goosebumps a couple times just listening to it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I like the way that he's doing this, the way he's going about this. I just
because it
wish
feels
that
like a creative flair that he did, like his own like personal touch.
And I wish that would have been.
It became a Kevin Perjurer documentary.
Exactly. I wish it would have been the whole thing rather than just like bits and pieces here.
See.
And I think that's one of the things that made it feel YouTube-y, is that it felt like Cyanide and Happiness clips.
Okay.
You remember them?
Yeah.
It felt like little clips of theirs rather than
the 2-minute warning.
Oh my gosh, it's the 2-minute warning. Danny Lavelle, how'd you feel about this thing? You already said that you'd watch it again.
Yeah, I think it's really enjoyable, and you're right. I'm glad that we had this particular discussion towards the tail end of like trying to examine like okay, like it's difficult because I wouldn't necessarily cut anything, but it's already an hour 42 minutes. But maybe the effort is to like probably add 20 minutes more and then separate it into 2 parts, maybe.
Interesting.
Of like 20 minutes more of maybe of like actual video footage of like Disney executives or like specific characters, or maybe more of those like little scenes, right? That even though the Shaped Land is Animal Kingdom is one of my favorite reveals, period, from media, Sizzle Serve.
Oh wow.
Even though it's one of my favorite reveals ever, I wish there was still more of like character in this. And I would not necessarily remove like all the information that was like given to us, but like I wish there was more interspersed Kevin Perjurer adding his own flair and character and storytelling, and just like interesting beats maybe, or bits either. I don't know, just I would like something more unique, but I still enjoy it and I would still recommend it. Mac?
I feel pretty similarly. I think that this would be fun if you are specifically interested in the topic. Other than that, if you just like documentaries or whatever, I'm not sure if this is the one that I would pick. I think it's very well made. I think it's very good. I think it's a very good, especially YouTube video. Really high production quality. I understand why the channel's so popular. But at the same time, I think that there was a couple things that they could have changed to make it a little more accessible. And also, like you said, I like the parts, but I think that they could have split the FastPass video and FastPass Plus into separate parts. I think that's just like a clear and easy distinction that could have been made early on that would have made this a
lot easier to consume.
Yeah, I think so. And also just like in terms of like commercially, like people that are clicking on the video and the way the YouTube algorithm works and things like that. Anyways, Danny, what we were consuming next?
Whenever we do,
who knows? For our start off for next season is an in-theaters new movie called Nope by Jordan Peele. Thank you.